It is those very early days in recovery that were always the toughest. Yeah, we hear all about the first days of physical hell where the addict's body is literally writhing and jerking from the pains of withdrawal. 3 days of throwing up yellow liquid bile with poison being excreted from almost every pore of your body. That is the part that addicts fear the most, and that hell is what keeps us using every day. Once I decided to kick, I could brace myself against the storms of withdrawal. The 3 days of physical hell were sometimes endured, and other times I broke down before even the 3 days had passed, screaming and shaking because it was just too much. Many times, though, I endured the 3 days of physical hell, determined to get clean. Back then, I thought that once the worst of it was over, once the physical symptoms had dissipated, I believed I was in the clear. But it's those early days of recovery, after the sickness had subsided, that always led me back to using. I would make it through until the puking and shaking were over. I would make it through to where the constant groaning that went along with the unbearable discomfort had faded. I made it through all that hell to find myself able to finally leave the house and venture back into my life. And yet I always seemed to go back to heroin within the first 2 weeks. After the 3 days of hell had passed, my body was so tired. It felt as if it could take an hour just to walk several blocks, as I dragged my feet the whole way, scraping my toes against the concrete. My shoulders slumped forward because I could not muster the strength to even hold my body upright. My breathing was slow and deliberate, straining with the weight of each breath. The obsession slowly crept back into my brain, entering because I knew a little more dope would give me the energy. The image of powder, pills, and pleasure would begin this dance through my mind. Sometimes the images waltzed a cheerful and melodic dance, while other times the images moshed to the hard edges of punk, screaming and sliding in the mud, pounding against all other images in the mire. These images danced back and forth, spinning and swirling and slamming to the music in my head. I thought of brown powder, smelling it in the remnants of those senses, tasting it in the caverns of my memory. My mind screamed for the bittersweet taste I so desperately craved. I thought of pills, a million different shapes and sizes, spilling all over the mirrors of my mind as I crushed them and snorted them and shot them in the closets with my memory. I thought of needles. I thought of spoons. I thought I felt the needles slide in like a knife, gliding into warm butter left on the counter. I thought about blood, flowing back into the chamber of the syringe, bursting forth like a poppy flower, and my breath quickened from these memories, dancing to the music of my mind. The dance escalated as the images swirled all through my head, and a physical response followed as I sweat or I tried to catch my breath. The obsession spun through my head until it was all I thought about. Pills and powders and pandemonium and also pleasure. My tired legs dragged along behind me while each step repeated the word heroin. The images of dope swelled so vibrant in my mind, more vibrant than even the world in those early days without heroin. The soft, fuzzy edges of the high had long since faded, replaced with hard, metallic edges. The images pounded me over and over. Usually I could withstand a few days of the mental pounding. Usually I kept my cool at first. A few days of the insanity were bearable, but before long I began to crumble. The crashing images, the constant beratement eventually eroded my walls. The thought crept back into my room, gripping me stronger than before. The thoughts urged me on, goading me that just a little bit would not hurt anything. Eventually I caved. Eventually the thoughts rounded the old familiar corner, bumping right into a man who was selling a bag of dope. Or a friend offered me a bump. Or I got so drunk that I just called the man anyway, as all my reservations were easily thrown out the window with too many drinks. And eventually I caved because of one thing or another. Sometimes it was just a matter of days, and other times it was a matter of weeks or even months. The cycle went on for a couple of years, where the constant high had faded and the times of sickness and well were more evenly balanced. I kicked, and I kicked. But as much as the kick sucked, it was the mental insanity in the following weeks that always drove me back. The last time I kicked, it was almost a year before the thoughts did not haunt me almost all the time. Each morning for at least a year, I woke up thinking about dope. The first thing I wanted each morning was dope, if even just a little taste. Even now, after being clean for more than 6 years, if I wake up feeling a little under the weather, I think about dope. The difference today is that I know where to put those thoughts. I know not to entertain those thoughts. And I also know those thoughts will always be with me at various times throughout my entire life. Once I had enough clean time under my belt, those thoughts no longer sent me into a frenzy calling up the dope man. Today I'm able to process those thoughts, realizing the urges are often a reaction to scenery, stress, or my need to escape. I'm able to look past the mere pleasure of getting high, while now I realize the dire consequences of that action. And today it is just not worth it. I have too much to lose today, and the life I have now is far better than any life I had on drugs. I just would not trade it, not even to get high for just one afternoon, because I know now that it is just not worth it.